Her hazards were on before I even saw the car. That orange pulse in the breakdown lane, maybe a quarter-mile ahead, visible just long enough before a curve took it out of sight that I had already moved my foot to the brake without deciding to. It was 7:14 on a Friday evening in October. I was in a suit I hadn't worn in 2 years, driving toward a restaurant I'd looked up 3 times without retaining anything about it, to meet a woman my best friend had described as perfect for you. Trust me in a tone that carried roughly 0 useful information. I pulled in behind her. She was out of the car already, standing at the rear wheel well, arms crossed, looking at the flat tire with the specific expression of someone running a cost-benefit analysis on how loudly they were allowed to be furious. Dressed for something. Dark coat over something nice. Hair done. She had the look of a person whose evening had just pivoted hard in a direction she hadn't planned for. "You need a hand?" I called through my open window. She looked at me. Then at my car. Then back at me in the suit, which was probably an odd combination with the offer. "Do you actually know how to change a tire?" she said. "Or are you just asking to be polite?" "I know how to change a tire. In that," she said, meaning the suit. "I've ruined worse." She considered that for about 2 seconds. "Okay," she said. "Yes, please," I got out. Her name, I didn't know yet. What I knew in the first 4 minutes. She had a spare that was properly inflated, which is rarer than it should be. She had a small flashlight in her glove compartment that she handed me without being asked. She crouched down next to the flat and held the light at the exact angle I needed, without me telling her the angle I needed. And she did not talk while I worked, which I mean as the highest possible compliment. She simply helped, efficiently and without commentary, and that was such an unusual thing that I noticed it the way you notice a room that is the right temperature, not because it announces itself, but because nothing about it is wrong. 12 minutes, start to finish. The spare was on. The flat was in her trunk. The jack was back in mine. She stood up and looked at the car. Then she looked at me. I had a streak of grease across the side of my right hand that I was going to have to explain at some point. "Thank you," she said. Genuinely, this would have been. She stopped. Looked at her phone. Something crossed her face, fast and contained. "I'm already late." "So am I," I said. She looked at me then, the suit registering again in a new context. "Date?" she said. Supposedly? Blind date. "Friends set it up. I've been dreading it since Tuesday." She looked at me for a moment with an expression I could not fully read. Something moved behind it. Why dreading it? The way he described her. "Perfect for you, trust me." No details. Every time I asked a follow-up question, he just said, "Trust me again." That's not a description. That's a hostage negotiation. The corner of her mouth moved. "Barely. Maybe she's dreading it too." "That would be fair," I said. "We'd have something in common." She almost smiled. Then her phone buzzed, and she looked at it, and the almost smile flattened back into the cost-benefit expression. "I have to go," she said. "I'm sorry. What do I owe you for the—" "Nothing. The suit goes to the dry cleaner either way. Drive safe." She looked at me for 1 more second. Then she got in the car. I watched her pull back into traffic, hazards off, the tail lights shrinking around the curve and out of sight. I stood in the breakdown lane for a moment, grease on my hand, and thought, that was the most comfortable 12 minutes I'd had all week. Then I got back in my car and drove toward the restaurant. Her name was Claire Ashworth. I found that out 6 minutes later, in the entryway of the restaurant, when the hostess said, "Ashworth party?" And the woman in the dark coat, spare tire, flashlight, perfect angle, "Do you actually know how to change a tire?" turned around and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and something she was working very hard to keep off her face. I stood there. She stood there. "Trust me," I said. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them and said, "He told me you were reliable." That's the full description? He said it 3 times. He told me perfect for you. No elaboration. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, at a volume intended only for me, "We can leave. We don't have to do this. There's an exit right there." "There is," I said. "We've already had 12 minutes together. We know it works. We do. If we stay and it goes badly, that's contaminated. That's a real risk," I said. We looked at each other. "I'm hungry," she said. "So am I." We stayed. Here is what I knew about her by the end of dinner. She was an architectural conservationist. She assessed old buildings for historical designation, which meant she spent her working life arguing that things worth keeping should be kept. She had strong opinions about bread and expressed them without apology. She had grown up in a family that communicated primarily through obligation, which had made her allergic to obligation-shaped things, which was also why she'd almost left the restaurant entirely. Her ex had been a man named Daniel Forsyth, and that name landed in the conversation the way a name lands when the story attached to it is not finished yet, set down carefully, without elaboration, like something still warm. I did not ask about Daniel Forsyth. She asked about the last relationship I described as significant, and I told her about a 2-year thing that had ended 18 months ago when I'd finally understood that I had been managing someone else's anxiety at a cost I hadn't calculated because I was too busy managing. She listened without giving me the face people give you when they're waiting to tell you their own version of the same story. She just listened. "The tire was flat," she said when I finished. "Sorry? You said you moved your foot to the brake before you decided to. You didn't drive past." "No. Some people would have." "Sure." She looked at me steadily. "That's not a small thing," she said. I didn't say anything. The conversation had done the thing good conversations occasionally do, where you stop tracking where it started because you've traveled far enough from it that the origin point is no longer visible. We walked out of the restaurant at 9:47. She had a parking ticket, street parking, 2-minute overage on a 2-hour zone, and she held it up when she found it under her wiper blade and looked at it with a very specific face. 12-minute tire change, 2-minute parking ticket, she said. "It's been a mathematically precise evening. 14 minutes total," she said. "That's what this date cost me." I looked at her. Was it a bad spend? She considered the ticket. "I'm going to need more data," she said. I called her the following Wednesday. We had dinner again Thursday. By the 3rd week, we had a standing Tuesday that neither of us proposed formally. It simply became the Tuesday by mutual and unspoken agreement, in the way that things that are working tend to formalize themselves. What we did not do in 3 weeks was discuss Daniel Forsyth. I did not push and she did not offer, and I told myself that was fine, that everyone was allowed unfinished things, and I believed that, and it was also not fully true. There was a version of fine and a version of fine, and I could feel the difference at the edge of the Tuesday evenings, where something was always slightly present that she was slightly managing. I found out what it was on a Thursday. We were at a wine bar on Clement Street when a man walked in, who she saw before I saw her see him. I caught it only in the peripheral shift, the way she went very still, the way her hand moved from the stem of her glass to the table, the way she didn't stop looking at me but her attention was suddenly somewhere else entirely. "Daniel Forsyth is behind me," I said. She refocused on me. "How did you went still?" She looked at me for a moment. "He's with a woman I know," she said. "Professionally, a colleague. She consulted on a designation project with me 6 months ago. Did you know they were? No. Short, clear, no. I did not know that. I watched her face run the calculation. Not jealousy, I was fairly confident of that already, and I would become more confident of it as the evening developed. Something more precise than jealousy. The geometry of something she'd suspected without being able to verify, now verified, at a table 15 feet away. He told me they were friends, she said. When I asked, he said she was a colleague who needed help with a project, and he was just being helpful. When was this? About 7 months ago. She picked up her glass, set it down without drinking. We ended it 6 months ago. He said it was about compatibility, timing. Things weren't connecting the way they should. She said it the way you say back something you were given that you never fully believed. I'd asked twice whether something had happened with her. He said no. Twice, I didn't say anything. I'm not angry, she said. I want to be accurate about that. She paused. I spent 6 months wondering if I had been wrong to ask. If I was the problem. If I had pushed him away by being suspicious of something that wasn't actually there, and it was actually there. It was actually there, she said. 7 months ago, minimum, she was not loud about this. She did not appear to be in crisis. She was doing what I had come to understand she did with large things, containing them precisely, expressing them accurately, putting them down in the right place. But the right place was currently a table at a wine bar 15 feet from the man, and the answer she'd been sitting with for 6 months. And that was a wait she'd had no preparation time for. Do you want to leave? I said. Absolutely not, she said. I'm going to finish this glass of wine, and I'm going to enjoy this conversation, and I'm going to let him wonder. I raised my glass. Then let's give him something to wonder about. The corner of her mouth. 3 millimeters. You're good at this, she said. At what? Staying. We stayed for another hour. She did not look at Daniel Forsyth again. Or rather, she did not look at him in a way that he could see. She told me about a building she designated the previous year, a 1920s textile warehouse that the developer had wanted to gut, and the 18-month process of making the case that the bones of it were worth more than the square footage. She made the case with the same precision she brought to everything. I understood, listening, that she had spent years making the case for things worth keeping, and that someone had not made that case for her, and that she knew this and was in the process of recalibrating around knowing it. When we left, she put her coat on and walked out without looking toward his table. I walked out beside her. On the sidewalk she stopped and tilted her face up for a moment toward the cold and let out a slow breath that had been building for longer than one evening. He's going to call me, she said. Tonight? Tonight or tomorrow? He saw us. What will you do? I don't know yet, she said. I haven't decided how I feel about having an answer 6 months late. She got the call at 11:18 that night. I know because she texted me afterward. He called. Said he should have been honest and he hopes I can understand. Wanted to know who I was with. I told him someone reliable. I read that and I did not respond for 30 seconds because I was deciding whether to say what I was actually thinking. I said it, that word again. Her reply came quickly. It's a short word with a specific meaning. Go to sleep. I went to sleep. Daniel Forsyth made 3 more attempts in the following 10 days, all of them arriving through the same channel, the direct appeal, framed as honesty, asking for understanding, circling back eventually to questions about me and where this was going, and whether she was sure. He was not threatening. He was something more difficult than threatening. He was the version of a person who knows the right vocabulary of accountability without using it to actually account for anything. Who says I should have been honest and means I should have been caught less suddenly. Who says I hope you can understand and means I hope you'll make this easier for me. She showed me the messages, which she did with the same tilt-the-screen gesture that that some people use, the one that means I want you to see this without having to explain it. Each one she showed me and then waited. He's trying to stay in your orbit, I said on the fourth one. I know, not because he wants you back. Because losing the story where he's still a good person is harder than losing you. She looked at me steadily. That's a precise thing to say. It's what I see. It's what I've been trying to say for 10 days, she said, and couldn't find the words for. She wrote him one response. She drafted it in my kitchen on a Thursday, which had added itself to Tuesday as a standing thing without formal announcement. She wrote, I accept your apology. I don't want further contact while I'm in a relationship. Please respect that. She read it back to herself. Changed one word. Read it again. Too much? She said. No. The relationship line. Is it accurate? She looked at me. Is it? I'm not the one who needs to answer that, I said. She looked at the text for another moment. Then she sent it. Then she put the phone face down on the counter and looked at it like it was a thing she'd set down and wasn't going to pick back up, and I understood that particular gesture completely. He responded 3 hours later with 2 paragraphs that were the written version of his phone calls. Understanding, accountability vocabulary, circling questions about where this was going. She read it once. She showed it to me once. Then she blocked the number, and she did it with the same efficiency she held a flashlight, at the exact right angle, without being asked, without commentary. That's done, she said. That's done. She leaned back against the counter. The apartment was quiet. She looked at me across the kitchen with the particular look she had when she'd finished a calculation. 7 months, she said. I spent 7 months wondering if I'd imagined it. You didn't imagine it? No. She was quiet for a moment. I'm a good assessor, she said. Professionally, I look at a building and I know in 20 minutes what's actually load-bearing and what's decorative. I've been doing it for 9 years and I'm rarely wrong. A pause. I ignored my own read on him for 7 months because he was very confident that I was wrong. You weren't wrong. No, she looked at me. I'm not wrong about other things either. I stayed very still. What other things? You pulled over, she said, before you decided to. That's not nothing. It's a reflex. It's the same reflex every time. I've watched it for 6 weeks. She tilted her head slightly. You moved your foot before you decided to. On the highway. On the Tuesday with the situation at the restaurant that I was going to manage myself, and you sat there and let me manage it and only said anything when I'd finished. At the wine bar. Tonight, she paused. It's a reflex, and it's consistent, and I have 9 years of practice knowing the difference between structural and decorative. I did not say anything for a moment. What am I? I said. Load-bearing, she said. She said it the same way she said everything, no more weight on it than it needed, which meant it landed with the exact weight it had. I had not had someone say something to me in recent memory that I needed no translation for, and this needed none. I crossed the kitchen. I'm going to be accurate about what happened next, which means I should tell you it was not the cinematic version. There was no music. She was in a sweater she'd worn all day, and I was in the jacket I'd never hung up, and the kitchen light was the unflattering overhead kind that nobody chooses for moments. She looked at me when I crossed the room, and she did not move toward me, and she did not move away. She waited the way she waited for everything, with all of herself present and accounted for. And nothing performed. Load-bearing, she had said. I found out what that meant the way you find out what a building is made of. Over time, and with attention, and by being the person who stays in it when the weather changes. She assessed my apartment 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, with coffee and what she described as a professional eye, and I described as an excuse to stay through lunch, which she did not deny. She pointed out 2 things I hadn't noticed. A hairline crack in the plaster above the east window that was cosmetic, and a door that didn't quite hang level, which she said was the frame settling and not a foundation issue. But worth watching. How do you know the difference? I said. The crack doesn't move, she said. The door does. Moving things tell you more than still ones. She was talking about the apartment. She was also, I understood, not only talking about the apartment. My friend Marcus, the one who had engineered the blind date and refused to elaborate on Trust Me, called me 4 months after the Friday in October and asked how it was going. I told him it was going well, and he said he knew it would. And I asked him why he had described her only as perfect for you. No details, trust me, 3 times. He was quiet for a moment. Because I knew if I told you she was a structural engineer who argued for things worth keeping for a living, you would have had opinions about that before you met her. I wouldn't have had opinions about that. You would have had an idea, he said, and the idea would have been in the car with you. This way, the tire was the idea. I thought about that for a moment. What was her description of me? I said. Another pause. Slightly longer. Reliable, he said. I told her 3 times. I sat with that. She uses that word carefully, I said. I know, he said. That's why I used it. She is sitting across from me as I write this, at the table I bought 8 months ago when the one I'd had for 6 years finally gave up in a way that was, she said, very clearly foundational and not cosmetic. She is reading something and making notes in the margin in red pen, which is how she reads anything she takes seriously. She has the flashlight on the table, the one from the glove compartment, because she uses it for the detail work in her assessments and keeps it close out of habit. She does not know I am writing about her. In about 4 minutes, she is going to look up and ask what I am working on. In the direct way, she asks everything, and I am going to tell her, and she is going to read it, and she is going to change 1 word. She is always right about the 1 word. There is a specific kind of person who knows what is load-bearing and what is decorative, in buildings and in people both. And if you have ever been seen clearly by that kind of person, not the version of you that performs well, but the actual structure underneath, you know what that costs them and what it is worth. Have you ever had someone read you that accurately before you'd given them enough information to do it? The person who knew the thing you were carrying before you said it out loud, and stayed anyway. And have you ever realized that the moment they first saw it clearly wasn't the grand moment you expected, but something small and ordinary? A reflex, a flashlight held at the right angle, a word used carefully? Tell me that moment in the comments. The exact one. Not the feeling in general, the specific detail you still remember. Subscribe if you're still here, because every story on this channel is exactly this. 2 people, 1 impossible situation, and the question of whether they figure it out in time.